What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, you are watching TWA Motorsports, and today we're going to get started on this lowering on this thing. And where we're going to start is, I think I'm going to attempt to cut the bump stops off out here. I say attempt, we're going to do that. But what I need to do is I need to get this thing jacked up. I want to do it out here because I don't want to throw stuff all over the 72. Don't want to throw stuff all over the 53 or the 55. And I got an open motor in there. So it'd be best if I did my cutting outside here. I really need a shop to work in. I need a shop to store cars in. Maybe one of these days. But anyway, let's see if we can get this thing off the ground. I'd like to get the back accomplished in this video. So we will start by getting the back up off the ground. See what we need to take apart to get cut off what I need to cut off. Hopefully it's a little easier on this one. I feel like it is for some reason. But let's get a jack under this thing, maybe a couple jack stands, and we'll go from there. Got this thing off the ground, got the wheel off. Obviously, you guys are on gravel, so I've got the jack stands under it. I've also got my jack under it on a couple 2x10s. But this is what we're looking to do. That brake's gross. That's a new caliper though. We need to cut this section off right here. And the cool thing about these newer ones is, the older ones, look how bad that is. That's toast. Let's get that out of there. I'm gonna have to put a new bump stop in anyway. But we need to pull this out of the way. And then what I'll probably do is I will get a zip tie, and we'll just tie this up on the fender or on the shock back here so it's out of the way and doesn't slip into our cutting area. But we need to cut that right there. And so generally what I do is I kind of scribe. Well, that's kind of terrible, but you get an idea of what I'm talking about. You don't want to go up into the frame. You'll also see though, see how it's hollow on the inside? The older or the newer ones are not. And so they're a lot harder to take off. But what I'll probably do is we'll cut across here, and then I may put a couple relief cuts in it, and we'll bend it down, and then we will cut out the backside all from this side. That's generally how I like to do it. But let me go get a zip tie, tie this out of the way, and then what I will do is basically cut in and out, showing you, this is what they call a free travel mod. What we're doing here is we're getting more clearance when we lower this thing. With just the angle grinder, cutoff wheel, pretty quick work of this, you can see what I'm talking about. Now, what I plan to do, and what I generally like to do anyway, is take off or pry this down and then cut it from this side. That way I'm not cutting over my head. I hate cutting over my head. But like I said, the older one, or the newer ones, this is connected back here. So you gotta make that cut all the way back. These are a little easier on you. So we should be able to get a pry bar and fold this thing back, or at least I hope. Well, I told you I was gonna cut in and out and show you, but it actually went so fast that I didn't have to. Sometimes you have to put a new disc on to make it long enough to hit that back area. But now that we've got it done, looks good. You don't have to get this off. Look, you can spend a ton of time and try to cut this completely off, or sand this, or grind this off the frame. I did swap over to this guy, the battery powered one, because keep a cutting disc on one and a grinding disc on the other. But I'm gonna spray some paint on this, and we're good to go. I can go ahead and pin our, actually, I'm gonna look at this. I should be able to go ahead and put our piece back in, but where was that at? Interesting. Is that right there? Or was it in this piece that I just cut off? Well, either way, we'll have to get it out of the way. But I'm gonna spray some paint on here to keep it from rusting, and then onto the other side. The other side's a little harder. I always put a piece of metal back here in the back to keep me out of the gas tank, but the way we're cutting it from the inside, generally don't have an issue. Just be careful on the opposite side. I'm not going to show you guys that. I think the next thing you're going to see, we'll have it back in the shop, and we'll start tearing some parts out the back of this thing. Now that we got both sides cut, I just put this up here temporarily. We're gonna have to find a new home for this, honestly, guys, because we cut off where it normally mounted. I don't remember this in the last one, but anyway, to give us some more room, I'm gonna grab a flathead screwdriver. We're gonna open this up to give this some room to move around. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the bottom of the shock. I believe that's 21 millimeter, but I'll go check real quick. Also gonna probably loosen this guy up. I think this is an 18, chances are we'll probably have to get it started with, I think it's a 6mm in the center, but I'll double check that and let you know. Well, like I thought, this one wants to spin. It is a 21mm to get the bottom of the shock, also the top of the shock, but this is a, oh, I'm so good, 6mm and 18 along the outside. So what I'll do is I'll set this on Tighten, okay, and I will get my ratcheting wrench on the other end, and we will get this loose first. Got the 21mm out of the bottom of the shock. I got the 18mm I was talking about out on both sides, and actually I'm waiting to move the shock, but we can do the 18 up here. I've already got the other side out because I had access to it. While I was under here with the 21, I loosened up the front of the lower control arm, the bottom one, not the top one. Same thing on the very bottom one, you could see it here where my thumb's at. I loosened it all the way out because we're gonna have to pull that completely loose. The springs, you can see we're very close to being ready to pull those out. So really, guys, the only thing we have left to take apart down here, since the sway bar's loose and that stuff's loose, is I did pull the 13 that held the e-brake cable here. I did that on both sides, but I need to get up here, put my 21 on the inside, like right here, my wrench, and then you got to reach over the frame and use a little bit of an extension to get the back of this, but you should have enough room with the impact to do that. And once that shock's out of the way, I'll have access to this 18mm here. But yeah, we're really, really close to yanking the springs out and being completely apart, I believe, with the back. Now that we've got both shocks out, you can see I let the rear end down, but we're putting a ton of pressure on those brake lines. You could release that 13, but we're just doing this temporarily to get these guys out of place. So I want to make sure you get the upper and the lower isolator. So you can see there's no isolator there. And I want to take this one out too. It's been there a minute. We need to do that on both sides. And I'm going to actually jack it up to take some pressure off those brake lines. But should be able to get your springs out. And we are completely disassembled at this point. Now we can move on to our new parts, which I will be listing in the description down below. But these are springs from a Trailblazer, and actually, in my opinion, they ride the best. So what I do is I take a piece of this heater hose. I do not use an isolator on the bottom. I take a piece of this heater hose and I wrap around the top, which will take me a little bit of time off camera, because I don't like running the isolator up top either. This just gives you a little more drop than what you would get if you put the isolators in top and bottom. I will list these in the description. It's you kind of have to order these a certain way, which comes with relocation brackets. I don't think you can buy the spring by itself anymore like you used to be able to. I've used the 4230 spring. This is the, I think I want to say they call it the 5315, but you have to buy it with the shock relocators. I bought these a long time ago. I don't think you can buy the springs by themselves, but I'll list them in the description down below. I was getting ready to struggle because it is a pain pushing this on there. A lot of times you got to put something on it. It is not wanting to go on that tight circle up top. So I was looking at the difference. Guys, we're talking about the difference between the stock and this is, it can't be 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to just use the stock isolators up top, and then we won't reuse them in the bottom. And the reason I don't reuse them in the bottom is it's not touching the body, so you generally don't get any noise from that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to clean these up a little bit. We're just going to set those in place, and then I'm actually going to go ahead and lift this up and put the spring where it needs to go, or at least start it. And the reason I'm going to do that is because we can have that out of the way, and then we can move on to doing a few other things that we need to do. We got to put bump stops in. We got to put relocation brackets in. I mean, could you just put the spring in? Yeah, you could do that. Don't do that. One of the other things I do is I put the spring in the same orientation on both sides. See, the opening is facing that way, right there at the very bottom. I try to keep that in the same spot on both sides. You could potentially turn it and get a little more lift or lower in on one side. That's just how I've always done it. I don't know that it's necessarily, I don't know if it's necessary, but that's just the way I do it. The other thing is the big opening part. Generally you could tell by the way the spring's labeled, but the open part goes to the bottom, the more squished together part goes up top. Now I've got the springs in there, and you can see that I've lifted them up a little bit, but now I'm moving on to the relocation brackets. Could we just rock with the springs? Yeah, that's what most people do. But I don't like that. So there is a right and a left here. You can see kind of how it fits up against the old one in the instructions here, but we've got this guy that keeps it together, bolts in the middle. And then we've got a sleeve to keep it from crushing that'll bolt it to the old one. And then this is where our new shock's gonna go. Now, like I said, not only does this lower the positioning of the shock, but it also relocates it. So it doesn't just go down, as you can see, it goes down and out. So that's exactly what we need. I will show you guys underneath once I get these both kind of loosely positioned. A little bit of a screw up on my part. You think as many of these as I've lowered, I'd know this by now, but I also normally buy the DJM rear piece, but this right here, okay, goes up to relocate our lower control arm. I know I told you we were putting the shock relocations in next, but when we put this up into place, it cinches down in the same spot that this bracket goes in. So I can't get both of them in place. So what they make and what I've ordered, I have some old ones off a older generation. They make these that bolt a little further back. So they're not as, you can see them side by side here, they don't go in as far. So that's what I needed. So I ordered those from McGoy's, and they should be here. Oh, look, it's gonna happen in this video, but I can go ahead and bolt this into place. So I've got my lower control arm bolts out. We'll be putting one, obviously, a bolt through the top, and then we'll be relocating our lower control arm to this hole, and that keeps the rear end pinion angle happy when you lift one. So I'm just going to continue the progress here. A bolt goes through the center to hold it up here. A bolt obviously goes to the top. I actually think there's a total of 3. But before we do that, we need to put our bump stop in, because with the control arm out of the way, it gives us an excellent opportunity to put our bump stop. Remember, we cut our old bump stop off the frame up there. We need something, okay? If this thing gets really rocking or you have a bunch of weight in it and it hits, we want it to hit something soft, okay? That's why they put bump stops in these things. So let me get this control arm swung down out of the way, and I'll show you exactly where I'm gonna put the new bump stop and what I'm using. You can see kind of how I've got my hardware situated. I don't love the bolts that came with this, but this one makes sense. So you've got 3 shorter bolts. One goes through the bottom like this, other 2 up top, okay? You can see I have the control arm swung out of the way at this point, but I want to show you what I'm talking about. There's a nice little hole right here. See that hole in the top of this pad to put your bump stop. However, it's very hard to get that in there if your control arm's in place. So what you can do now, with the control arm swung down and nothing in there, we can go grab our bump stops, which I am using Energy Suspension bump stops, these guys right here. I like these. They're relatively small, but they work well and they last. I'll try to list those in the description down below. What is it? 9.9103R. Let's get these guys in there. Now that we got these bolts tightened that hold this thing on, you can see I've got a ratchet strap here. And the reason I'm doing that is because when we try to swing our control arm up into place, it doesn't quite line up. That's why we only want to do one side at a time here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the ratchet strap to tighten this up and pull the rear end forward a little bit. Then I can get my bolt in place. Just a little trick that I learned after doing a couple of these, not to release both of these at the same time, just do one side at a time. Once I get that arm in, obviously I release my ratchet strap, and we've got this bolt. We need to tighten this up with the load on the suspension. So just put it in there, leave it loose. I left the front one loose. You're gonna have to loosen the front one or it's gonna wanna stay in place. I like to tighten all this, like I said, with the suspension loaded. But next, I'm waiting on these to come in. I went ahead and put in our new sway bar end link. And if you'll notice, this one has, it's kind of offset. Okay, one's straight, one's offset. The offset one goes on this side, or at least I think right now. The other one should be straight up and down. We'll go here and see. Yeah, this one will be straight up and down. I believe that'll work just fine. You know, this is one thing I didn't love about the kit that came from
DJM. It requires you to re-drill the suspension, and other companies don't do that. So like McGoy's doesn't require you to do that. On the DJM, when you have to move it over, and then they still send you ones that are offset. So I really don't understand that. They used to say it's because the sway bar hit the pan hard rod, but we're nowhere remotely close to that. So I don't know, maybe if you get a little lower, that's a problem, but we need to install these that came with the relocation brackets. So I've got that in. I use the stock bolt in the top and one of their supplied bolts at the bottom. We've got a ton of extra bolts. I'm not really sure what they were sending, but you'll see what I'm talking about as you go together. There's a long one, obviously, because this is bigger for the lower control arm. I use their supplied bolt here, and then 3 shorter ones to bolt this on. But we've got a bunch of extras over there. I don't know what that's all about. Now I can't install the bottom of the shock because we need the relocation bracket, but what I can do is go ahead and open up the rear shocks and put the top into place because, well, the top needs installed first. So let's do that. Let's open these up, put the stock bolt through the top and just loosely thread it on, and then we'll wait until we get the next piece for the relocation on the bottom. Look what just came in. Got my new box from McGoy's with the correct pieces I need. And you'll see what I'm talking about because they will actually fit with the brackets that I'm using. And we can continue this project. So, see what I'm talking about? How they're shaped like the other ones that I have. I have some plates to go in there. Let's see if we can get one installed. So you can see there's like 3 total bolts with this shock relocation. You've got one that they come in from each side like this, one on the other side. And then there's this threaded insert, okay, that goes on the top, keeps the bottom bolt from pulling through. You can see the bottom bolt in there, goes up from the middle. There's also a little steel plate. If you're using these on a 2006 or older, you have to use that little insert. Okay, you can see it. I don't have it tightened up yet, but it goes in the middle of this to cover that gap. If you're using on an 07 and newer, you don't have to use that. So obviously for what we're doing, we need it. And I noticed that with the other ones. That's one thing I didn't have. I could have used the ones I showed you earlier, but I didn't have that little insert plate or any of the bolts. So I'm gonna go ahead and we can tighten these as tight as we can get them, just like we did the upper ones here and the one in the middle. We can't tighten the ones that pivot though until we have the suspension loaded. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock that out, put the stock shock bolts in the bottom, and then guys, I'm gonna go to the other side and do it off camera, and I think we'll be able to set this thing down, or at least get it on something where we can tighten up and torque down the other bolts. We got both wheels on, both sides completed. Now we need to do some torquing. We've got to torque the A-arm that we unbolted to 130 foot-pounds. Top and bottom of the shock, 70, and then about 37 on the sway bar end links. And we are finished on the back. I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick, and then I will set this thing on the ground, and we'll take a look at this Cali lean in the back. But let me go grab my torque wrench. Let's get these things snugged up. Everything's torqued, including 140 on the wheels. Let's set this thing down, and look how silly it looks. With the back low and the front high. Let's see what she looks like. Woo-wee! Looks pretty good. Looks like you're popping a wheelie. Okay, well, we got the back done. Looks pretty good. I'd like for it to be a little lower, but hey, you deal with the springs that are available, you know? It's pretty low when you look at the back here. Look at that hitch. Looks pretty low. I should have measured it before, I guess, but well, now that we've got that accomplished, I guess let's go ahead and start on the front. Now that we got the front off the ground, man, guys, look at that oil leak. I gotta do something about it at some point. We're gonna go ahead, we're gonna get loose these guys here with a small flat blade screwdriver. Open these up, get those out of their little channels. Once we do that, I think we should be able to unplug it up top I just want to get this out of the way. We're going to be reusing the brakes, which is unlike me, at least for now. I'm going to take, so let me get this unclipped. I'll probably use a flat blade right here. I may be able to do it with this, but let's get this loose, unplugged up top, and then I'm going to take the 10mm out that holds this in place. And generally you break this, so I'm going to leave this in place for now, and we'll try to push it out the other side here in a minute. But let's get that out. I'm also going to attempt to get the Torx, unless I can get to the 18mm that hold the whole caliper bracket on. That'd be more beneficial. I'm also going to have to take these guys loose that keep the brake on. So let me get those things knocked out. Those are 18s for the bracket, and I think I can get to them, but before I do that, let's take the 18 off of that guy, and then I'm going to grab a hammer. We're going to hit that, see if we can loosen it up, and then that'll give us the ability to swing that around and get to the 18s that hold the caliper on. I need to go grab something though to pin it up so the brake lines aren't like just hanging loosely. So let me go grab something, and then grab the hammer. We'll knock this outer tie rod loose. We're going to be replacing that whole tie rod, inner and outer. Couple whacks with a hammer, came right out. Try to keep it in place because we're going to try to measure up the new one versus the old one. But now you can see I can swing this over and get the two 18s out that hold the caliper. That way I don't have to fight with the guide pins. And then we'll be able to get this out of the way and hopefully hang it up front somewhere. Changed my mind. I'm going to actually take the hub off when it's off the car or truck or whatever you want to call it. Next, I'm going to focus on the 18 and the 24. So the lower ball joint is a 24. Now, I do not have a deep 24, so how I cheat this, if you put that on as far as you can and then put your impact in it, you can generally back that thing off. So I'm going to start with that one, and I'm going to use a swivel and an 18 to come up through the middle of the A-arm at the bottom here, knock that loose. Or these are generally like 30 foot-pounds, so you can generally get them loose with a ratcheting wrench if they're not going to spin on you. Either way will work. It's going way faster than I thought. Both of them came loose relatively easy. I generally thread them back on a little bit, just so this thing doesn't like shoot off. Same top and bottom. And then you just basically hit them. That one's loose. And we'll do the same thing at the bottom. I don't like using a pickle fork, guys. It just destroys. Now the uppers we're going to be replacing, but the bottoms, I don't want to destroy the bottom ball joint. It seems to be good, and I'm not replacing it. So in my opinion, hit it with a hammer on the side here. It's completely fine. Get it loose. Then take your spindle off. I think I want to use a bigger hammer on this one. It's not one to come loose. So what I'm going to do is, just so I'm beating around on it, I guess, basically, I'm going to go ahead and try to take the 15mm out that hold the hub bearing in place. Hub bearing seems to be good. Not noisy anyway. So anyway, let's use a 15. See if we can knock these bolts out. Sometimes just the vibration of doing other stuff will knock that loose, and it'll get it out of the way so I can knock around on this with possibly a bigger hammer. Guys, I don't know what we did before impacts. Now you can see I've got way better area to beat around on this thing. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go grab I've got a little 5-pound sledge. We're going to hit it here. We're going to hit it on the inner there, and I think it'll fall out of place. Took some doing, but we got that spindle off there. Now I'm going to move on to the upper A-arms. So a couple things you're going to need to know here. These are 21mm. This thing has never been aligned, so it still has the little plastic inserts. I'm actually going to leave those in because that's how I'm going to spot up where the new A-arm is going to go. Normally I would mark them, but since we have that, I'm just going to leave that together. I will tell you though, you're going to have to take this 13mm out in order to push this line up a little bit to drag this bolt out. So I'm going to go ahead, take the 21s loose there. I'm also going to, at the same time, this is a 21 also at the bottom of the shock, I'm going to take it loose as well. You can see that I've got the upper A-arm out. There's two things I like to do once I get these out. One is I like to use a scraper, which you can see my scraper there. Go on the inside of these and outside of these and kind of scrape some of the debris off. Then I take a little brake clean and wipe them down. The other thing I do is I kind of take them out and bend these pockets out a little bit. It'll just make installing the new ones easier, and you'll cinch them back down when we go to tighten them up. I then, if you're not replacing your upper eccentrics and the bolts, I took them over to my wire wheel, cleaned them all up, so they rotate really nicely when I go to get it aligned. Just things I've learned over the years. Sometimes these things get tight and they don't want to move. So if you clean all the rust off of them, if it has any, these actually looked really good, so I didn't replace them. At this point, I've got the bolt loose at the bottom of the strut or shock, whatever you want to call it. I put a little WD-40 up top. That is a 15 millimeter. Guys, a lot of times if you push this back, you're going to have to crimp something on the top of it while you're loosening it. It's just going to want to spin. That's just the nature of it. So I'm going to get that out next. The only thing we have left is I'm going to have to get a big adjustable end wrench to get our tie rod out. This is the one that I said was bad and loose. And obviously we're going to do this to both sides. So I'm duplicating all of this stuff on the other side you guys aren't seeing. Let's get the strut out, and then we'll work on getting this out. We'll have everything out of the way. Now that we got the strut out, I'm going to show you here. There is a nut. The outer or the inner tie rod has a nut here, and I don't know what size it is, but it's huge. And so we just need to loosen this. This whole end will thread off, but you can see the size of adjustable end wrench I'm using for a couple reasons. One, it's the only one I have that fits, but then the leverage I need to get that thing loose. So we'll get that loose, and that, like I said, the whole inner and outer will spin out together. I want to keep them together so I can kind of match up my new one. Now that we got the old one out, like I said, it just, once you get it loose, it spins out pretty easy. You can see where it goes there. We've got our new inner and outer. And so what I like to do is I like to put these beside each other and try to match them up. I will tell you that this is obviously gonna come with the new castle nut and the new lock nut. This will also come with a lock nut. You just don't need that one because it comes with this. It's meant to, if you lose it while you're replacing the inner or the outer, they both come with one, but only need one of those. So I'm gonna spin the lock nut on first. Then I'm going to thread that on until it matches up with this one, and then we're putting it right back in place. Now, it doesn't matter how you do this, you're still going to need alignment, but you can see what I'm talking about. I've tried to match it up as best as possible. Don't forget to put your grease fitting in. It does come separately, and we're ready to go back together. Got the tie rod, inner and outer in, and tight. I just tighten it as tight as I can get it with that adjustable end wrench. Now we're on to the A-arm. It's a pretty dummy proof. So how this works is we just set it back up into place. It's already got the grease zerk fitting in there. We've obviously got a new keeper, but our spindles came with a new lower bolt or nut for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little grease. I've got some grease sitting here somewhere. A little bit of grease here on the inside, and then we're going to put it back in the exact same place. Now we're not going to lock it down. We don't want to tighten it yet, but I'm going to go ahead and get the bolts that I cleaned up and the eccentrics back into place. And I'm going to do it a little backwards because it's just, to me, it's easier to get this in with the shock not interfering. So we'll put the shock in after, but let's get this up into place next. This is a great time once you get those just snug down. You can see we've got a lot of movement. That's fine. We want to tighten this down with it up here, otherwise you're going to wear your suspension out. But this is a good time to put that 13 millimeter back in before we move on to the spindle. Next, we're on to the spindle, and the way the spindle works is because it moves it up so far, it interferes with this upper. So they supply you a stud that goes in the top, and then you use your two factory bolts in the bottom. They also supply you with a nut to put on the front of this, but we need to put a little Loctite on this and snug it down, and then we can grab our hub assembly, put it in, and then the two remaining bolts in the back with the nut on this new stud on the front. Now, do not over tighten this, just snug this down into the opening. Yeah, I can't stress that enough. Don't break this off. Got the hub in place. We need to torque this top one to 75 foot-pounds, and then the stalkers we're going to torque to 133, but I'm going to wait until we get it up into place to do that. I'm going to go ahead and snug them all down with the impact and then a wrench on this inner one, but then we can move it up here and get it ready to install. I'll probably put the shock in next before I get this up into place though. Got that somewhat snug together, but our shock comes from Beltec. Guys, for the money, it's hard to beat. It's the best cheap shock you can buy. But we need to take this upper off, push it up into place, and then we'll get this started. But same thing here, we're not going to torque this down until we get a little load on the suspension. Goes back in the way the old one came out. It does have a jam nut, which is, I don't know why they do that, but apparently they back off. I don't know why they don't use the nylock, but we'll put the first one on and go ahead and get it in place at least. You'll notice I had to lift it a little bit to get the lower part of the shock in place, but it's in place at least. Now we can grab this, put it up there, and we are going to be using the supplied upper and lower bolt for the ball joints because it's recessed, as you can see, in order to get the clearance that they need. So let's get that up in there. That, you know, a lot of times they do that for the four-wheel drives because you can use these on four-wheel drives as well. But let's get the spindle up into place and get those snug down. We can even do this while we're in there, I guess, the outer tie rod. A couple things I'm going to torque now. We got this up into place. 92 on the bottom ball joint, 37 on the upper, 133 on each of these, and then remember like the 75 that they call for the stud. And then we can swing it over. This just gives me a little more room to work before I hook this up. I may even put the brake on because then I can torque the brake by turning it relatively easy, but we'll see. Let's go ahead and get those knocked out. I changed my mind. I went ahead and put that in. We need to torque this to 44 foot-pounds or just a hair past to get our cotter key in. Got the rotor back on. Now I'm going to try to swing the caliper back in place. Just make sure your lines, see how they're kind of kinked. Well, they're not kinked, but they're just kind of rolled up. Just make sure that you can unroll them and it makes sense. This obviously is going to go here. This piece here is going to go on the top plate on top here. And if you have to, just get this out of the way because it needs to go on the outside of the brake line. Now that we have this on, I torqued it to 145. We need to get our brake lines lined up, put our 10mm back into place. Now on the other side, I told you guys that it's very, very hard to get that keeper out of this one. So what I always do is, it's a hole that goes all the way through. I just use a zip tie here. So I'm gonna cinch this down. McGaughy's actually provides, you can use the original 10mm, I think, but McGaughy's provides you a bolt that goes in here. So we need to cinch this down, and then we can grab our ABS line and get back to where it needs to be, which goes up this side and plugs in up top. And then it's down to getting some weight on this and starting to torque some things. Now what I've done is I put a block and a jack under the A-arm to compress the suspension so we can tighten some things down. Now we've already got everything up here. What we need to focus on is we need to go to 140 on these, on the nut for these. Just make sure they're in the same spot. If you don't have your original plastic pieces, like I said, I left mine. Other than that, the bottom of the shock, I've been going to 65, and the top, I just go until this starts to balloon out a little bit and then lock the jam nut on the top of it. But other than that, we have to get some grease in all of our new fittings, including the one on the inner tie rod. I'm going to go ahead and put some in the lower just to make sure everything's got grease in it with my grease gun over there on the ground. I got to go get some grease actually. And then we can put the wheels back on. Before I do that though, I am going to spray a little bit of WD-40 in the torsion bar opening right there on both sides and spray some on the bottom because we're going to move to the torsion keys next, and they're probably been in there for a little bit, so that might help move those. I'm also, like I said, spray the bolts that loosen and tighten those on the bottom side. I didn't get the correct bump stops, so for now I'm not going to be running any bump stops there. We'll just see how it goes when we're going down the road. The ones that I bought just won't fit in that location. So the last time I did one of these, I cut the bump stop bracket off, so that's probably why I ordered the wrong ones. But I think the next thing you guys will see will be us under the underneath, trying to get the torsion bars loose. So in order to get the torsion bars out and replace the keys, like this is the key we're going to be using. And the main reason I'm using these used ones is, for one, they're here. And two, if we keep this thing down the road, we may upgrade and remove the torsion bars. And I just didn't want to spend money on a set of drop keys. So anyway, what happens is currently in the truck, there is a bolt that rides, and I think it's this one right here. And so what we do is we put this tool in there and pinch this together on this opening, and that'll raise that off the key, or raise that off the bolt, and we can back the bolt out and then loosen this up, and that will gradually lower the torsion bar. I'll try to show you once it's in place. At the top, there's a spot that this goes in. So kind of a neat design. I don't love torsion bars, but this little tool is a neat design to unload them so you can take the keys out. Now, I've got a punch here and a hammer because generally they're seized up in this. I did spray, like I said, WD-40 in this, but you never know. Let's get this thing in there and see if we can get the torsion keys out. Here's a torsion bar removal tool. You can see kind of what we've got here. It's kind of at an angle. I don't love that. I may see if there's a hole a little far over. That's going to make getting that 18 millimeter a little difficult. So let me see if I can move the top over a little bit to get it more straight up and down. But that's kind of the way you take these things out. We'll tighten that up. That'll relieve the pressure off the 18, and should be able to get the keeper out. You can see up above. You can see once we get it tightened how loose that gets. That means the pressure is off of it, that 18. And no, there wasn't another hole up there, so luckily that turned sideways. Now we'll back that 18 out, and then we'll back this tool off, and that torsion bar will gradually swing down. This is what adjusts the torsion bar up and down. This is the keeper. And when that bolt goes up, the further up that bolt goes, the more lift it gives. The more you put the bolt down, the more lowering you get. So when people say they're adjusting their torsion bars, that's what we've got. So now we need to back off the tool, and we'll hope that the torsion bar wants to come loose from the key. A lot of times it's seized up, it's rusted. That's why I sprayed WD-40 there. And then front, we have to drive the torsion bar forward enough for the key to drop out of the middle there. And I feel like I've done a lot of these torsion keys, but they've never came out that easy. I literally just tapped that thing and it fell right out. So let's go grab our other one. Oh, maybe I already put it over here. Not sure where I put it, but well, let me find the other one. Let's put these side by side and line them up and see if they're any different. They are. Okay. See the difference here when they're lined up? This is what I'm talking about. This will give me the ability to get some additional drop because I have more of it clocked. That's the way this works technically. We should be looking at it like this, I guess. Not a lot, but there's probably an inch there that I can get it lower. So this is kind of a cheap, poor man's drop key off a 3/4 ton truck. We're gonna put this back in, push the bar back in it, load the tool back up, and put our keeper back in, and then go do the opposite, or go do the other side. And then we'll have to tweak this. This will be one of those deals where we run it up and we have to adjust it and figure out where we need to be. But I now have all the grease fittings filled. I've got a pneumatic grease gun, which I just hate grease guns. They make a huge mess. I mean, I get it, but see, it's pushing past this a little bit. I'm gonna let it set for a little bit and then come back and wipe it down. I always wipe down my grease zerks, all my fittings. Just drives me bananas to have stuff leaking under the bottom of the car. That's why that oil leak's making me crazy. But we're ready to put the wheels on and try to spot in a toe set at least. Set it down on the ground and see where we're at. So just looking at this thing, I straightened the steering wheel. It's pretty locked in. I may not make any adjustment. This one needs to come in, it looks like a little bit, but I may leave it alone for now. I just need to snug up those jam nuts on the outer tie rods, and then we're gonna set it down. Okay, without making any adjustments, it looks pretty good. Now, chances are those front tires are rolled under, so we need to forward and backwards to try to get the wheel to set. But I put those 2-degree additional upper A-arms on. And the reason I did that is because when you lower with the torsion bar, you get a ton of negative camber, and I didn't want that. So right now, it looks pretty good. Now, you're gonna have to really dial in the height, adjusting those torsion bars. You know, you may have to back one side 1/4 of an inch off, go drive it, bring it back, measure it. It's gonna be kind of a process to do that, but it's raining right now and this thing's clean, so I'm not gonna pull it out. But hopefully in this video, I can get it outside and show you guys kind of what it looks like from afar, and then get this front to settle out a little bit. I just took this thing down the road to get the front to settle, and boy did it. Yeah, and guys, sorry if you're hearing some wind noise. It's freezing cold, and but I wanted to take it out and get like a step back from it so you guys could see. Look, I think the back's gonna settle as it rides, but the front, you can see, definitely settled a bunch. I actually think we're gonna have to crank up those torsion bars a little bit. I'm gonna have to get some measurements right to left, but you can see this tire doesn't look too bad. So you can see that it's got some negative camber. We can deal with that. That one though is really laid in. So we're gonna have to at least raise this side a little bit, and it may just be where it's setting right now. It's not really level out here. I'm gonna have to put it back in the shop over there, but definitely a big change that I am super excited about. The other thing I did is, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I adjust the front bumper. It was leaning back a little bit. I actually just loosened that inner bracket. It's like an L-shaped bracket back here. Pushed it up and tightened it back up. I don't know if something hit it or something down the road, but if you guys did enjoy the new look, or are enjoying the new look of the Tahoe, we've got some more stuff to come on this. It's still ticking, still trying to work through cleaning out the oil and whatnot. I don't know if we're gonna get, I don't know if that's gonna work. We may end up having to put lifters in this thing to get around that noise. But if you are enjoying this videos on the Tahoe, please, like always, smash that thumbs up button. Guys, if you are not subscribed, go down, hit that subscribe. Of course, like always, ring that bell notification. That will notify you every time we drop a new video on this or anything else. Stay tuned to see what we work on next.